everybody, it is Steve, your friendly neighborhood lawn gnome. Welcome back to another episode of Stats, Trends, and Picks over here on That's Comical. And if you're watching and it happens to be a Wednesday, happy new comic book day. Well, I am very excited to talk about how things fared in July and, of course, what we're having to look forward to in August, especially because of the fact that August is a very important month for me. It is my wedding anniversary month and my own birthday month, so I'm really excited for that. But more importantly, it is also going to be the month in which I go to, for the first time in a long time, a comic book convention. I'm actually going to be going to Terrificon up in Connecticut with my good friend and That's Comical colleague, Andy. We are really looking forward to this convention just because of the lineup and all the guests that are going to be there. On the comic side, we've got a real winning bunch of creators. The big guest of honor is going to be the creator of the Ninja Turtles himself, Kevin Eastman. We've also got a special guest appearance by Chris Claremont. Walt and Louise Simonson are going to be there. Dan Jurgens, Christopher Priest, Mark Silvestri, and that's just to name a few. And that is only the comic creators. I'm not even talking about the celebrities. We're not necessarily going to be filming our experience there, but we're definitely going to be looking forward to coming back to you guys to show you if anything actually got signed and what it might be. Just keep your eyes out on our X so you can see if anything gets posted. How did July go? Well, let's take a look at the numbers. It was actually a relatively good month. 57 books in total, but of course we all know that Marvel is still doing what Marvel does, and we had a tie between the DC Comics and the other conglomerate, with Image Comics just one comic book total behind. But I am also going to want to say something very important. Marvel has actually had a pretty good month for me. Personally, even though I didn't go out to buy a ton of Marvel Comics, there were definitely some great reads that they offered. The biggest surprise for me was the anticipated by many, but not necessarily me, Chip Zdarsky's brand new Captain America run. The first issue came out right before the 4th of July. And I actually did not go to my store to get it, but the reviews started coming out, and people were saying that it was a pretty darn good book. And unfortunately, when I reached out to my comic book store to see if there were any left, he actually said that every copy was sold out. So I actually had to hunt down a new copy, and when I read it, I have to be frank, I was very impressed. And not to mention, when we got to the end of the month, we saw a really strong Ultimate Universe haul. We had Ultimates 14 and probably one of the strongest Ultimate Spider-Man issues in issue 19. But of course, the other big news that was announced at San Diego Comic-Con, which took place in July, was the fact that the Ultimate Universe is not going to be as long as people were anticipating it to be. They actually already announced that at the end of 2025, going into 2026, Dennis Camp is going to be writing Ultimate Endgame, which is the conclusion of the Jonathan Hickman-created Ultimate Universe. Again, I'm not too thrilled about that, because these Ultimate books, the ones that I was reading, if anything, were really good, but that just shows you why Marvel is just not up there in terms of all the comics that I buy. And also, I'm taking a look at all the numbers in regards to totals up until July, and the fact that there was not even 50 Marvel comics that were purchased until July says a lot about what they're doing and how they really need to finally figure out how to fix themselves. Yes, let's take a look at the percentages. Under 13% went to Marvel, almost 30% for DC and the other conglomerate, and 28% for Image. Took a look at the charts, guys. It is definitely a roller coaster now that things are finally shaping up. DC, Other, and Image are just constantly in battle for that top spot, and Marvel is just cruising at the bottom. And even though I did say some really positive things about Marvel, I even got a really good read in Tony Fleeks's The Thing, issue number 3, which is his 5-issue miniseries, but it's a 5-issue miniseries. And going into the future, there's still not that much in terms of ongoings for Marvel that I am really interested in. So let's take a look at my predictions from July and see how we fared. So for the first week of July 2025, I thought that it was going to go to the Prelude to a Future Past, which was the one-shot Uncanny X-Men floppy, and in my last video, I called it issue 104.5. That's actually an error. It was 140.5 by Chris Claremont. And I got a big surprise. It was a good issue, but I think my favorite thing about this book was the fact that in this floppy was not only this special prelude that Chris Claremont wrote just a couple of years back to celebrate Days of Futures Past, but they also included the 2 issues of Days of Future Past in the comic itself. So that was pretty awesome to have the entire story with this prelude in that one floppy. But the winner that week went to a book that I'm not really talking much about, and I really should be. It's a DC Comics Black Label from a writer who I really like, and that's Ram V, and that is Resurrection Man, Quantum Karma, issue number 4 of 6. If you like Alan Moore stuff, if you like Miracle Man, if you like Watchmen, and especially if you like a lot of stuff that Ram V writes, you are definitely going to like this story. It's very thought-provoking, it's a real thinking man's comic book, and even though I haven't really been raving about it, it almost always shows up in my top 5 reads, and if there's less, it's usually in my top 3. But I always do talk about it in my honorable mentions as well, at least most of the time I do. For the second week of July 2025, I actually thought that it might have to be a tie. I was anticipating it going to the Archie Comics special, Kevin Smith Presents Archie Meets Jay and Silent Bob, of course written by Kevin Smith, and the long-awaited Patrick Horvath anticipated sequel of Beneath the Trees Where Nobody Sees, Rite of Spring, issue number 1 from IDW. It didn't actually happen, but one of these books did end up on top. Beneath the Trees Where Nobody Sees, Rite of Spring was a good issue. I don't think it came off as strong as the first original issue did from the first volume, but I'm not gonna lie, Archie Meets Jay and Silent Bob is everything a Kevin Smith / View Askew Universe fan would ever want. It's a crossover you would have never anticipated, but my God, did it work! It really worked, even though we all know who Archie is, and we all know who the Jay and Silent Bob View Askew Universe are. You never would have expected it to work, but my God, it worked, and there were so many callbacks to great nostalgic things of Jay and Silent Bob and even Archie. This was fun. I absolutely adored this book. I laughed so much while I was reading it, and I highly recommend it. For the third week of July of 2025, I was hoping and praying that it would actually go to Space Ghost Annual number 1 from David Pepose over at Dynamite, and it didn't happen because it got pushed 1 week. So it had to go to something else, and I was really looking forward to this book because it's supposed to bridge the gap between Volume 1 of Space Ghost, which was wonderful, and the upcoming Volume 2, but of course we all know what was going on with Dynamite. Thankfully, it looks like everything is back on track for them. So I ended up having to give it to a book that, of course, I was excited to read, and my God, was it an amazing book. And we went back to Image Comics and the Ghost Machine universe, and I gave it to Jeff Johns' Red Coat number 13. Something big is happening, guys. Something big is happening in the Ghost Machine universe, particularly in the unnamed story arc, and I cannot wait for the next issue and see what's going to happen in this world. But it was only 1 week that Space Ghost Annual number 1 got pushed, and wouldn't you know it, for the 4th week of July of 2025, did I mention that it was a 5-week new comic book month? Those are my favorite kinds of comic book months. It finally went to Space Ghost Annual issue number 1. Even though I was anticipating that the top book was going to be DC's Superman 28, which was the Legion of Darkseid storyline in the All-In initiative, I'm so glad that it went to Space Ghost Annual. So technically, I'm going to call this one a win, because I wanted this book to be one of my top picks of July eventually. So Space Ghost Annual was everything I wanted it to be. I absolutely loved this story, and it just makes me all the more excited for David Pepose to continue bringing me along on this amazing Space Ghost journey. And speaking of David Pepose, when we got into the 5th and final week of July 2025, The book that I was hoping and praying would be as good as I thought it was going to be, boy, was I right. After reading the Free Comic Book Day issue, I couldn't be more excited for Mad Cave Studios' Speed Racer #1 from David Pepose and David Tinto. This is such a fun read. It's got action, it's got comedy, it's got drama. It was also such a beautiful read to look at. The art was stunning. And another nostalgic property that David Pepose has taken a hold of. He's doing a great job with Space Ghost. I still need to read a little bit more of Captain Planet and the Planeteers. It's only 2 issues, but between those 2 and Speed Racer, David Pepose is just firing on all cylinders, people. This is such an amazing time for comic books when it comes to the indie companies and the nostalgic properties. So, if you love Speed Racer, whether you watched the old show, if you love the movie like I do from 2009, what a great movie that is. Speed Racer #1, I think you're going to love this comic book. And there's a big world being built around Speed Racer, just as big as they're doing right now with Gatchaman over at Mad Cave Studios. So it's a fun time for anime properties in Western comics. So that was how July fared. What are we looking forward to in August? So I actually want to take a big gamble, and I want to start August off with a prediction of a top pick for a Marvel comic. Because there was such a great word of mouth for this book, I really loved this first issue, and I want to see what happens in Marvel Comics Captain America #2 by Chip Zdarsky and great art by Valerio Schiti. I really enjoyed the first issue, and I am really expecting some good stuff from Chip Zdarsky, and even though he had a weak Batman run over at DC, he's not a bad writer. But the truth of the matter is, I think he really loves Marvel characters a little bit more. Very much the way Jeff Johns is when it comes to DC characters. So I really am anticipating a very strong second issue. For the second week of August of 2025, I was a bit befuddled by the fact that this book was even happening. It's a mini-series that's coming out from DC Black Label called Superman: The Kryptonite Spectrum. And the team from Ice Cream Man. Yes, the horror anthology Image Comics series Ice Cream Man. W. Maxwell Prince, Martin Morazzo, and Chris O'Halloran are all a part of this Superman book. So, I love these guys, and I love W. Maxwell Prince, but I never in a million years would have expected him to take on such an iconic superhero like Superman. So boy am I excited to see what happens here, and I am just anticipating myself to be weirded out beyond reprieve, but extremely satisfied. Let's hope I'm right. For the third week of August, a book that I didn't see coming from a writer who has just been giving me mostly good things. And that is a new Image comic from Rick Remender and art by Daniel Acuna. And this is a book called Escape. It is a war story featuring one of my favorite guilty pleasures in comics, anthropomorphic animals. Beneath the Trees, Wild's End, those are 2 of my favorite books. To see a story of anthropomorphic animals in a time of war, I am excited. Now, Rick Remender doesn't always hit the right highs for me, but when I take a look at the fact that I read books like The Sacrificers and The Seasons, I am really hoping that Escape will be a read that I enjoy and am willing to gush about, just like some of his other works. And for the final week of August of 2025, even though there are really a lot of great books coming out that week, I am going to, I guess you could say, play it a little safe, just because I have a feeling I'm going to really push for this one to be my favorite of the week. And that, of course, is the day right before my birthday that this book is coming out, so I'm excited about this one. And it's over at DC Comics. It's the conclusion of the Jeff Lemire, Dustin Nguyen miniseries, Robin and Batman, Jason Todd. I truthfully have been enjoying this miniseries very much, and I am hoping that, like the original Robin and Batman, which really should be renamed Robin and Batman Dick Grayson, which really stuck the landing. I'm hoping the same for Robin and Batman Jason Todd. And I'm even more excited about reading this book because at San Diego Comic-Con, they teased that another miniseries is coming, just like I was hoping would happen, and it's no doubt in my mind it's going to be Robin and Batman Tim Drake. I mean, we could be surprised and get Robin and Batman Carrie Kelly. I have no idea. But knowing that Lemire and Wynn are going to get back together again for another Robin and Batman trilogy miniseries makes me very, very excited. So that's going to wrap up another episode of Stats, Trends, and Picks. Please leave your comments in the box below. Let me know how your July 2025 went. What were some of your favorite reads? Did I miss anything? And I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next one.